afternoon and good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's mini webinar, which is being given by Wellbeing Aid, which is an organization that strives to empower individuals to lead healthier and more fulfilling lives through evidence-based practices and sustainable life choices. My name is Maria Cecilia Mosquera. I am a pediatrician and a public health preventive medicine physician, certified in obesity medicine and lifestyle medicine, and I have a certificate in culinary coaching, which basically means that I work as a lifestyle medicine physician to help people optimize their well-being using their lifestyle. Things like nutrition, physical activity, sleep, stress management, avoiding risky substances, and working on their healthy relationships. Today's webinar is titled How to Eat More Yet Be Healthier. It's one of our Nutrition Bites mini webinar series. So before this session, there have been at least 2 mini webinars where we have already discussed a whole food plant-based way of eating. So if you would like more information, I will refer you to those at the end of this session. This session is being given on the occasion of the 7th of April, which is World Health Day. So this is why we're talking about how to be healthier and how to eat more in the process. Just in case you would like to know, this session is being recorded because it is a Facebook Live session. So what will happen is Facebook will automatically post this session on the Wellbeing Aid Facebook page as soon as it's finished. So you'll be able to refer to it later. And let's just ask the question, who wouldn't love to eat more yet be healthier? I know that all of us would love the opportunity to have that. And the interesting thing is that there are ways to do that, which is what we're going to be talking about today. It is a 30-minute session with our learning objectives, and today's outline is here. We're going to start with talking about how to add foods to your life, how to think about variety, how to eat more by drinking less, and then I'm going to give you some tips on setting SMART goals. And at the end, we'll all stay to answer some questions. As your questions arise, feel free to write in the comment box on Facebook Live. I'll try to keep an eye on it, and I'll either try to address them while we're speaking or at the end if more convenient. But let's start about how you can add foods. So many times when you're thinking about going on what people would call a diet, you're taking away foods from the foods that you might be enjoying or eating. But today we're actually going to talk about adding foods. So how do you eat more things, but actually be healthier? Have you ever stopped to think about how you set food on your plate? Do you have a strategy, for example? On the picture you see here, I live right now in the country of Cyprus in the Mediterranean. And this is a typical dish. If you go to a restaurant, you might be able to order some meat with some bulgur wheat, which is called bulguri, and they might serve you French fries. Do you have a strategy of how you place things on your plate? If so, we're going to talk about that in a moment. If not, think about it. What kinds of foods do you put in your plate? How do you divide your plate? Do you divide your plate in any way? Because what many of us are doing is we're actually filling our plates or our day with highly processed, nutrient-poor foods. When we talk about things like the traditional Mediterranean diet, many people in the Mediterranean region where I live have moved away from that because we're eating more packaged food, more prepared food, more processed foods. And I will explain what I mean by processed food with what you see on this screen here. So let's start with the red box that you can see on the left-hand side of your screen. So if you talk about unprocessed foods, those are foods, natural foods that are really the edible food parts of plants and animals. So let's say an apple that you picked from a tree, an orange that you picked from the tree, a carrot that came from the ground, a bell pepper, those are all unprocessed food. If we talk about minimally processed foods, those are foods that have been slightly altered, for example, for preservation. So if you take a nut and you dry it, that is being minimally processed. If you take some edamame and you shuck it, you take off the hull and you freeze it, that means that it's been minimally processed for preservation because you froze it. Whereas a processed food means that you have added something to it, like usually salt, sugar, or fats. And when you look at something like a can, it would have 2 to 3 ingredients in it. So let's say beans plus salt and sugar. And these can be readily eaten without further preparation. For example, I don't know if you know this, but when they make cheese, and many times they have to add things like salt to it. Or if you brine olives, you also add things like salt or olive oil. Same thing for bread. So those are processed foods. But what I was talking about before are highly or ultra processed foods, which require several processing steps to make them. They use multiple ingredients. So if you were to look at the ingredient list, there would be more than 3 ingredients on that ingredient list, and sometimes up to 15 or 20 with things that you can't pronounce. And it many times includes artificial colors or flavors. So in our lives today, we're surrounded by highly or ultra processed convenience foods that make their way onto our plates when we're snacking, we're out and about, and to the plates of our children and families. So if you are eating a lot of processed or ultra processed foods, or if you consider yourself an omnivore and you eat pretty much a little bit of everything, perhaps it can feel challenging to take away the things that you're used to eating, maybe the things that you feel that you enjoy. Let's say you enjoy having your bag of potato chips or your canned soda every day. So that can feel challenging to take things away, which is what you usually think about when you think about going on a diet. So instead, it can actually be less challenging and easier to do if you think about adding more nourishing foods. For example, starting with your favorite dishes. If you have a child like me, they tend to like something like pasta, plain pasta. My daughter happens to like pasta with olive oil, salt and pepper, that's it, ever since she was little. But what about if I were to start adding some things like vegetables to her pasta dish? Or if you look on the left-hand side picture, these photographs that you'll see today are actually all from my kitchen. So let's say that you ate eggs and you were to add something like zucchini, which is something that in Cyprus they do very commonly in the summertime. In other parts like the United States, maybe you've never done that. So add a nourishing food to a food that you already enjoy. For example, if you were to eat salmon, you can make a spring roll or something that contains a lot of fruits and vegetables like that you see in the picture. If you make rice, this happens to be a risotto, you can add things like green beans and carrots and peas. Or if you, like my family, like Mexican-inspired dishes, instead of just having beans with tortillas and cheese, for example, let's say you actually mix your beans with a whole bunch of tomatoes, bell peppers, cilantro, and other spices. Or when you make noodles, you add some carrots and green onions and some mushrooms. So there are ways to add more nourishing foods, starting with your favorites, to try to increase the amount of nourishing foods that you have in your plate. But also, if you were to eat that plate of pasta, just say plain pasta with olive oil, salt, and pepper, you might, some people say that when you eat pasta, you might feel hungry a little bit later, feel very full at the beginning, hungry a little bit later. And let's say you instead were to have half of that plate, instead of taking away half of the pasta, you add things like carrots, green onions, mushrooms, a whole bunch of vegetables, so that half of your plate is actually vegetables that are mixed into that pasta. And let's say you even add some chickpeas or some edamame, which have protein and fiber. Now your meal becomes more nourishing. So it has fiber and protein on top of the carbohydrates that maybe if you were eating whole wheat pasta, it has more complex carbohydrates. So you create a dish that will be more filling for longer, but also has more nutrients to nourish your body. That's one way to eat more, is to add more volume, more foods that nourish yourself to the plates that you're already eating, for example, like pasta or rice. So eat more by including fruits and vegetables, plant foods into the dishes that you're already eating. And what happens is the more fruits and vegetables, plant foods that you add to your diet, it really takes away the room for some of the less healthy things that you might have been eating during the day, because you'll feel full and satisfied by having eaten that dish. You might not feel hungry to be able to feel like you need to eat a bag of potato chips later. Because having more fiber means it's a more filling food. So before I asked you this question, how do you think about what's on your plate? Well, I mentioned before that I'm a lifestyle medicine physician, and the recommendation from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine is to think about your plate and divide it in half and actually fill an entire half of your plate with your vegetables and maybe fruits. So instead of, many people fill their plate with a whole bunch of rice and let's say beans with some sausage. So your entire plate is full of rice and beans. But let's say in reality, what would be a healthier way of having your plate be filled is that half of it is fruits, vegetables, and fruits. A quarter is your proteins, like your beans and lentils, etc. And a quarter of it is your whole grains, like rice and bulgur wheat and quinoa, etc. So half fruits and vegetables, half proteins, and half whole grains. So here I showed you that dish that I showed you earlier, where if you were to try to add plants to your plate and divide half of it so that half is fruits and vegetables, it would look more like the two pictures on the right-hand side as opposed to that picture I showed you from that cypress meal on the left-hand side. So if you've never done this, think about how you divide or how you put the food on your plate. Are there ways that maybe you can add more fruits and vegetables that leaves a little bit less room for those other things that are not as great for your health? For example, things like red meats and processed meat, things that have saturated fat that can be harmful to your heart, for example. So, as I mentioned, in lifestyle medicine, we recommend dividing the plate this way. What this is called is a whole food plant-based way of eating. It's not a diet. It's the pattern, the way that you eat across, let's say, the week. One example of a diet that you may have heard of that is it used to be whole food plant-based is the traditional Mediterranean diet. So it was heavy on things like minimally processed vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. As I said before, though, many people in the Mediterranean have moved away from the traditional Mediterranean way of eating, and actually are trying, and people around the Mediterranean that think about health and public health are trying to help people work themselves back to that traditional whole food plant-based eating pattern. There are some other things that define it as a Mediterranean diet, but that is one whole food plant-based dietary pattern. Another one would be people that refrain from eating any animal products, but they eat whole foods. It's not the same as being vegan. So vegan may not eat any animal products, but you can be vegan and eat junk food. What I'm talking about here is having a whole food plant-based way of eating, where you focus on whole foods, as I said before, things that are minimally processed, and emphasize vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And you can be 100% whole food plant-based, you can be 80% whole food plant-based, you can be working your way in that direction, you can be just starting. Everybody can be wherever they are at this moment. But the idea of this conversation today is to give you some tips about how to add more whole foods, more plants into your way of eating. And why am I suggesting that? So why would you want to try to eat more plants? Well, research shows that when you shift from animal-based foods to plant-based foods, this actually lowers your chance of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, death, among other things. I'm just giving you some examples here. And it actually improves your weight, so obesity. It improves your blood pressure, so high blood pressure or hypertension. And it improves your glucose and hemoglobin A1C, or type 2 diabetes. So if you have type 2 diabetes, for example, and you were to shift to a whole food plant-based way of eating, it is possible that you could go into something we call type 2 diabetes reversal or remission, where your numbers go back to normal. Internally, your body becomes insulin sensitive again, and you are on your way back to being a healthier you. So just think about that there's evidence that shifting them towards eating more plants is beneficial across many fronts, many aspects of your health. So take status of how much you incorporate plants into your diet, and think about whether there are ways that you could add the amount of plants that you eat and then that you have on your plate. So that's the first one, is add more foods, more nourishing foods to your plate. Think about the ways to incorporate them. The second point I wanted to discuss today is to think about variety. So there are healthy dietary patterns, and research shows what they're talking about in this is people who eat a variety of food types with at least 3 servings per day of whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, and who also have meat and processed meat less than twice a week. So whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, but eat meat and processed meat less than twice a week, these healthy dietary patterns lower your risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and colorectal cancer, for example. So having variety is important. And the wonderful thing is that there are so many different types of whole grains, legumes, beans, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. So eating a whole food, plant-based way of eating does not have to be boring at all. These are all, as I said, photographs from my kitchen. There are so many types of food, so many types of meals that you can take and you can make, and variety is important for your well-being, but also because it provides your body with more nutrients, and your body uses and needs nutrients not only to run and work every day, but to keep you healthy. So if you look at these two pictures, which one do you think has a wider variety of nutrients? The picture on the left-hand side or the picture on the right-hand side? I can imagine you probably know that the picture on the left-hand side has a wider variety of nutrients with its components that include things like chickpeas, sweet potatoes. It has greens. I think this is spinach. It has broccoli sprouts. It also has things like red pepper hummus, and it has seeds and nuts on it. Whereas on the right-hand side, if you think about what's composed, what a big donut like this is composed of, it's things like flour, sugar, salt, maybe some yeast, and sweeteners. So your body needs nutrients. The more nutrients you're provided, the more it can use to keep you healthy. And there is a concept that I wanted to share with you, that you want to think about having foods in your life, in your day, in your plate, that are more nutrient dense. That means that they're filled with nutrients. So the plate on the left-hand side includes many nutrient dense foods. So foods that have a lot of nutrients in them, like let's say red peppers or a sunflower seed or a chickpea. Versus the food on the right-hand side, like that big donut, that is calorie dense. So it has a lot of calories, but not a lot of nutrients. So you want to try to emphasize nutrient-filled, nutrient-dense foods in your diet, in your way of eating. Things like legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, those are nutrient-dense foods. There are some plant foods that also are a bit more calorie dense. You may know that things like nuts and avocados also have a higher number of calories than other plant foods, like let's say if you compare it to spinach, but they happen to be nutrient dense and a bit more calorie dense at the same time. But the idea is you want to have foods that are the most nutrient dense possible, and then just think about whether they are also calorie dense too, to see how you spread them in your day. So you don't want to spend your day eating 3 plates worth of walnuts. The idea is variety, because if you're the kind of person that eats as your vegetable tomatoes and cucumbers, let's see, those are your favorite vegetables, and that's really all the vegetables that you eat every week, you're not giving your body as many nutrients as somebody who is eating tomato cucumbers on Monday, carrots and bell peppers on Tuesday, broccoli and cauliflower on Thursday, and so on. So your body can use the variety of nutrients you provided to run efficiently every day, but also to work towards keeping you healthy, your heart healthy, your brain healthy, your gut healthy, to help prevent cancer, etc. So think about eating nutrient-filled foods and increasing that variety. I'll give you an example here about how you can optimize nutrition by including more variety of plants in your dish in your week. This is a plate that I made for myself the other, in this past couple of months. And I sat down and counted how many different plant foods were just in that one dish. It actually had 14 different plant foods in that dish. And it's actually full because it has beans, and it has a quinoa, and it has greens and vegetables, and it has herbs and sprouts, and it had beets. It's full of protein, fiber, iron, many phytochemicals, etc., etc. Now think about a plate that maybe you had 8 today. How many different plant foods do you think were in that plate? Do you think that you were providing your body with an optimal number of nutrients? Could you have added a variety of other plants into that dish to provide your body with more opportunity to receive and use nutrients? And I'm not just talking about vegetables. For example, when you use fresh herbs, they also provide nutrients, things like polyphenols, antioxidants. Things like nuts and seeds have fats, but they have healthy fats like walnuts and omega-3s that are important for heart health, for example. They have fiber and magnesium. So when you think about adding variety, don't just focus on on adjusting the number of vegetables that you eat, but think about the whole spectrum of plant foods that includes herbs, spices, seeds, nuts, legumes, vegetables, whole grains, beans. All of those can help give your plate variety and your body more nutrients. And that's one way to eat more and be healthier. So change it up. Let's say you are that cucumber and tomato person, that those are the veggies you eat. Maybe you want to think about if you want to try some foods that are new to you. On this screen here are actually plant foods that I've tried within the past couple of months. I saw some red rice and I said, why not? Let's try it and see, because it has some interesting polyphenols that are good for your body. I also love chickpeas, but at one point I saw these black chickpeas that are called black chana, and I said, why not? Also, things that are this red dark color, like black beans, have an interesting polyphenols that are good for your health. And I tried mung beans, which is the plate in the middle front, that's green, that you can see there. And on the right, mushrooms, because in my life, I'm not sure why, but I don't always include a lot of mushrooms. So I'm constantly trying to think about ways that I can add mushrooms, which have a lot of interesting nutrients that can help your body. So think about, are you in a rut or a routine of the foods that you're eating? Are there foods that are new to you that you might see at the supermarket that you want to try? And I'll give you an example from yesterday. About a week or two ago, I saw some dried adzuki beans at the supermarket, and I said, I've never seen this before. I don't think I've eaten it before, so let me try it. I cook beans pretty much every day in my electric pressure cooker, so I said, let's just soak some and see what happens. So I made some adzuki beans, and these are the dishes that I made yesterday. And it turns out adzuki beans have protein, fiber, iron, calcium, phosphorus, manganese, sulfur, cobalt, etc., etc. So I've just added some adzuki beans into my week. What are the things that you might want to try the next time you're at the supermarket? See if there's something that looks of interest to you and see if you want to try it. And one way to do that is to assess how many plants you're eating in 1 week. Have you ever done that before? Maybe you have already. If not, there's a challenge where you try to eat 30 plants per week. Maybe you can start 1 week by just seeing how many plants you actually eat that week. And then the week after that, you can try to reach that goal of 30 plants. Maybe you can try, maybe your goal, you want to try a little bit lower if you're that tomato cucumber person. Maybe you want to eat 20 different plants in 1 week. And that can count and include things like vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, beans, pulses, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. So remember I showed you that dish where I had 14 different plants. With just that dish, I was almost halfway there. So think about assessing how many plant foods you're actually including, not only in your day, it's easier to count it over 1 week. So we talked about first, adding more foods. Second, thinking about variety. And now let's talk about what you drink. So you can actually eat more by drinking less. And let me explain that. So try not to drink your foods. Solid foods actually reduce your hunger more than liquid foods. And what that means is if you eat an orange, you're less likely to feel hungry afterwards than if you just drank a glass of orange juice. And so let's say you skipped breakfast and you drank a glass of orange juice in the morning today. But then not so long later after that, you were hungry. So you stopped at the vending machine and you got some chips or crisps. And so in reality, if you would have eaten something like an orange or a more filling breakfast that was more nourishing and nutritious, you would have been hungry and would not have been tempted to get something that is perhaps more processed and less healthy for you. So if you were to have eaten more of the nourishing foods, you would be healthier, but would also have eaten less of the foods that can be less beneficial for your health. And so I just gave you the example of juice. So you might say, but what? Is there something wrong with drinking juice or a smoothie? No, those have nutrients. Obviously, orange juice has vitamin C. If you eat a smoothie, depending on what it has in it, it can have a lot of nutrients. But just think about the fact that if you drink your calories, you may feel more hungry later. A smoothie has more fiber than a juice, so it might be more filling to drink something like a smoothie because it's basically just the pureed fruit, which includes the fiber. But actually eating the fruit itself that takes more time, etc., to digest might be even more filling than that smoothie. So just think about if you're drinking your calories. Obviously, if you're drinking things like sugar sweetened beverages, you want to focus on something different like water. Because as I mentioned before, let's say you drink a soda in the morning, you might be hungry soon afterwards, and might be tempted, if you don't have healthy foods around, to turn to a vending machine or order some processed food. So there are ways to eat more healthy, more foods themselves, like a whole orange, and be healthier, feel fuller, and not turn towards foods that are less nourishing to you. So focus on water or whole foods instead. And the last part of today's sessions, I just want to share with you quickly on how you can take what we've talked about today. So perhaps something has triggered your interest. Maybe you have a healthy eating goal. Maybe you said, okay, I can understand why I want to add some more plants into my diet. Or I think I need to eat more vegetables. Or I'm going to try some new beans like those adzuki beans that you mentioned. Or you know what, I'm drinking too many of my calories that are empty calories in sodas and soft drinks. So I'm going to try to drink fewer soft drinks. So these are goals. But a better way to frame your goal is something called a SMART goal. And SMART goals, SMART is an acronym that stands for S for specific, M for measurable, A for achievable, R for realistic, and T for time-based. What that means is you say specifically what you're going to do, how many times you're going to do it. Do you have what it takes to do it? For example, if you say you're going to eat vegetables, do you have them in the freezer or your refrigerator? Is it realistic? If you only are that tomato cucumber person, that's all you eat every week. If you say, okay, I'm going to eat 8 fruits and vegetables every day, that may not be a realistic change for you to try this week. And it's helpful to have a goal that's time-based and that's not too long. For example, if you say, I'm going to start tomorrow and I'm going to eat 8 fruits and vegetables every day for the next 6 months, and you were that tomato cucumber person that's all you eat, the only vegetables you eat that during the week, going to 8 fruits and vegetables every day for 6 months is too long of a time frame. It's helpful to frame a goal in a 1-2 week time frame, for example. So let me give you a more specific example. Let's say you're that person that says, you know what, after today's session, I can see how I would want to eat more vegetables, and I'm going to do it. I will eat more vegetables. Well, instead of saying your goal in that manner, make it a SMART goal. Say when you're going to start. So you're going to say starting tomorrow. Say what you're going to do exactly. So you're going to add 1 green vegetable to your lunch. How often you're going to do it? You're going to do it every lunch day. And for how long? For the next 1 week. So this is a very clear goal. You can write it up and put it in your refrigerator or write it in your notes on your telephone. And then what you do is at the end of that week, you assess what happened. It's not about seeing whether you did it perfectly. It's actually about seeing what obstacles you encountered and what are the ways to overcome them. Maybe you realized, hey, I didn't have time to go to the supermarket, so I wasn't able to eat green vegetables. So you adjust that. Or maybe you say, I think green vegetables are too hard because I don't know that if I like so many, I want to start with yellow vegetables. So maybe you need to change your goal and try it again for another week. And what you do is you make these SMART goals, assess them every week to see what obstacles you encountered, tweak the goal and change it a little bit, and continue a goal or adjust your goal every week so that you continue to move forward making goals that are beneficial for your health. So think about how you can make your SMART goals. We've talked about several ways today that you can eat more by adding more foods, adding variety, drinking less of your foods and trying to eat them instead, and how to make SMART goals. So think about something that triggered your interest. The important part, it's about progress, not perfection. And every little step in the right direction helps. If you want more information, as I said before, about what a whole food plant-based way of eating is, we've already done 2 mini webinars that are recorded and saved on the Facebook page of Wellbeing Aid, and I just put that information here for you so you can see what they were called. And I would also urge you to talk to your healthcare professional, your doctor, your dietitian. Obviously, they would have a wealth of information to share with you. Because what we would love for you to think about is ways to add more plant-based foods to your plate, how to add variety into your plate in your week, how to try not to drink your foods but eat them instead, and how you can use SMART goals to help you move forward and progress towards optimizing your well-being. So I do have a feedback form where I would love to hear from you, including about what you thought about this session and your recommendations for the future. I have placed it in the comment box, and I'll also place it under the recording for today's session, because I would very much appreciate your anonymous feedback. And I would love for you all to think about what is one thing you're going to take from this mini webinar today. So think about that. If you feel inspired, add it to the chat box. I just wanted to share that we do have a webinar on April 15th, but it's not only a webinar, it's a cooking demonstration. So it's half an hour and it's about healthy snacks for families. It will also be on the Wellbeing Aid Facebook page. These are the resources and references so that they get saved on the recording, and I will stay here for questions. I'm looking at the chat box right now. And if you don't want to stay for questions, thank you very much for your time and participation. Otherwise, those that have questions, I'm going to turn to the chat box right now. I apologize that if I stop sharing my slides, the recording or the live Facebook Live will finish. So I'm going to just stay here and try to add them. If for some reason we'll get disconnected, I will address your questions by answering them in the comment box. So thank you very much for your attention. And I'm going to look at some questions here that says, can you give specific examples of different ideas on how to nutrition up your dish, like oatmeal for breakfast, to make it more filling and nutritious? Absolutely. So I like to eat oats every day too. I used to only eat plain oats with, let's say, some berries and a banana. But like the comment from Anna Maria says, is you can add things like hemp seeds, which are rich in omega-3s, fiber, and other nutrients. I tend to add ground flax seeds. So hemp seeds, ground flax seeds, chia seeds. What I also do is I make a pan-toasted granola that has jumbo oats. It also has barley, so jumbo oats, barley, hemp seeds, flax seeds, ground hemp seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds, cinnamon. And in that way, on top of the fruit that you're having with your oats, you can add a variety of nutrients. You might have had 7 already or 8 different plant foods in just that one oatmeal dish. Some people even make savory oats that you can add things like turmeric, for example, or ginger, or vegetables like greens or cauliflower. That may sound good to you if you're a savory type of person. So, you know, there's no reason why eating oats in the mornings has to be just something that has oats and fruits. There are many nuts and seeds, even vegetables and spices that you can add to liven it up. I also add things like nutmeg. Instead of just the cinnamon, I add nutmeg to my oats in the morning. So thank you for that question. And then adding flax to the smoothie is the other question. Yes, so in my house we do eat smoothie. My daughter likes to make them. So we usually add greens, something like, I always have frozen spinach on hand, so we add that. We usually try to add some source of vitamin C to help absorb that iron. So if we add something like of orange, we chop up an orange so that it has the fiber and everything in there, not just the orange juice. We sometimes add things like additional omega-3s like the ground flax, but I also add things like, recently I've been adding ground, there are some powdered algae that you can find, which might sound a little bit interesting, but it actually turns the smoothie a very bright green. Things like chlorella, for example, to add different types of omega-3 fatty acids. So you can have vegetables and fruits, but you can also add those seeds that were mentioned, like hemp seeds or flax seeds. So absolutely, that's a great point. People add all kinds of other nutrients like ginger, for example, to their smoothies if you like the flavor of ginger. So it doesn't only have to be fruits and vegetables and seeds. It can also be things like roots and spices like ginger. And the other question is, what things can we add to our salads to power them up? So my lunch is always either a cold or a warm salad, depending on the season. And one example of the things that I do is I make a base of greens and I cook my greens every day. And when I mean greens, this is not just kale, but I cooked, for example, yesterday I cooked kale with zucchini, onions, garlic, and ginger. I added turmeric and black cumin. I added some ground pepper, and I usually add some other spices, for example, like some ground cumin, some paprika, maybe some cayenne pepper. But also, I always top mine with things like pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds because I want to increase the amount of magnesium that I'm eating for my bone health. And I also happen to top mine with nutritional yeast because if I'm eating mostly whole food plant-based, vitamin B12 is something you want to think about. So I eat a fortified nutritional yeast with B12. And my salad always has some type of legume or bean, and sometimes it has nuts. And a whole grain like quinoa, for example. So my formula for the salad is usually greens and veggies plus a whole grain plus some type of legume plus nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, and things like cilantro and green onions. So thank you for that question. What about veggies in the morning? What kinds of examples? So for people that like to eat, that still eat eggs, I gave the example of zucchini. Or, for example, my daughter used to like green peas and eggs. For people that are not eating eggs, that are eating more whole food plant-based, there is a way that you can make something that's made from chickpea flour that tastes like eggs, and you can add all kinds of veggies to that. There are people that include greens and veggies in their oatmeal. I can say with full honesty that I'm not that kind of person, maybe yet. So I am not the greens in my oatmeal kind of morning yet. But there's no reason why you can't eat a savory dish that has veggies, some leftovers from the day before. There's no rule that stops you from eating veggies in the morning. So if you're a savory person, you're maybe the kind of person which you might actually appreciate eating some of your yummy, delicious leftovers from the night before that had veggies in the morning. So there's no limit. Really, the sky's the limit. Let's see what the other question is how about the use of oils for cooking? So this is a great question. It depends on you and your health, I'll say for one, and the type of oil that you're using is the other. So what you want to emphasize, so the things that are most beneficial for heart health, for example, are to try to minimize the amount of saturated fat that you're adding to your diet. So for heart health, for example, if you were to use an oil like a coconut oil, which is very high in certain kinds of saturated fat, that would be less heart healthy than another oil, let's say if you were to use olive oil. There is one way of thinking in the research and evidence that suggests that some people, for example, people who recently had a heart attack would benefit from using low to no oils in their way of eating. Whereas if you turn to people in the Mediterranean, the traditional Mediterranean diet, what they use is olive oils. And there is some evidence that suggests that there are health benefits to using olive oils. So the question about the use of oils in cooking is a bit of a complex question. I will say that what I try to do is actually I try to minimize the use of added oils in my own meals. What I try to turn to is the whole food as much as possible instead. So let's say about olives, I actually try to include olives in my dishes instead of olive oil to start. But if I do cook with something, I tend to use olive oil, but I use a little bit of it. I'm not the kind of person that's going to just fill my entire pan with 2 inches of olive oil to fry something. I tend to dry saute things like onions because you really don't need oil to saute onions. If you haven't learned about that before, you can look it up. So what I would say is stick to the oils that we know are most heart healthy. Olive oil happens to be one of them. The ones that are least processed and have the less saturated fat. And what I would say is in any and every way is sticking to the whole food is always the best way possible. So emphasize by filling your plate with whole foods. If you're choosing to use an oil, just think about your own personal health and how you can optimize that by also selecting, if you're going to use oil, the ones that would be most beneficial for your heart. People here in Cyprus, for example, olive oil would be the one that they would be choose to using. So thank you for that question. So the other question I see is, what things that have saturated fat that are plant-based should we limit? Are you talking about avocado oils and nuts? Use them but limited, or can we freely use more fatty plant-based foods? So yes, there are some plant foods that have more fats in general, and some of them have saturated fats, things like coconuts, avocado oils and nuts. But these whole foods like avocado and nuts and seeds, for example, have healthier fats and other nutrients that have some benefits. So for people that don't have that are healthy, for example, including avocado oils, avocado, nuts, and seeds is healthy to include in your diet. There is one way of thinking that suggests that people who have had heart disease, for example, recent heart surgery, want to emphasize the other plant foods as opposed to those that are heavy and laden in fats, and that, for example, you don't want to be eating 6 avocados a day. It's a balance between the variety of foods for the nutrients that your body needs. So it is true that there are plants that have fats in them and plants that have saturated fats. There are benefits to eating, for example, walnuts are one of the healthiest nuts to eat. And the people that, even some of the specialists that suggest that heart patients minimize the amount of nuts and seeds that they eat, if they're going to recommend a nut to a heart patient, it would be a walnut. So yes, some plants have fats. Yes, some have saturated fats. In my own way of eating, because I don't have any heart issues, I include seeds every day, nuts every day. Avocado I also include. I just try not to eat 8 avocados a day, or 1 cup of nuts a day. You try to think about the fact that they're nutrient dense, but also calorie dense foods. So, okay. So other question is, what advice do you have for type 2 diabetics related to carbs in a whole food plant-based diet? Is remission really possible? Yes, remission is possible from type 2 diabetes. Now, if you ask your doctor who has not been trained in something like lifestyle medicine, they may tell you no. But what is true is that if you shift towards eating a whole food plant-based way of eating, where you focus really heavily on plants and take away the animal-based saturated fat foods like red meats and processed meats from your diet, that helps minimize the fat in your body that is actually impeding the way that insulin works, and that is in part what actually leads to the difficulty that people with type 2 diabetes have in managing the sugar, the glucose in their body. So I would say that if you have type 2 diabetes, you might, and for example, your type 2 diabetes is not under control, or you're interested in finding out whether there are ways that you can reverse it and even go into remission, give a whole food plant-based way of eating a trial. Try it for 2 weeks and see what happens. There are many people, doctors that I know, colleagues that in the US do something called a jump start. Well, they'll start you on a trial, let's say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They'll check your lab tests before and after, and you can start seeing a significant drop in not only some of your sugar levels over the coming months, but also things like your fat, your lipid panel. So yes, type 2 diabetes remission is possible. You can search for it in your internet search engine to understand it. It takes a healthcare professional that understands it to support it, because many people think that carbohydrates are the only problem in type 2 diabetes, but that's not really the case. It's about the complex carbohydrates and the balance with the other foods that you're eating. It's also about your weight. So if you moved towards a healthy weight, lose that fat that's stored in your body, that will also help type 2 diabetes and will help your management. So yes, a whole food plant way of eating can be an effective way to actually help manage and even reverse type 2 diabetes. So a question says, should we limit edamame or soy products? I thought soy products could be an issue for health. So it's actually a misconception that if you eat things like soy, for example, it's going to cause breast cancer. So soy products are, in fact, recent research has shown that whole soy products like edamame and tofu, for example, are beneficial and can help prevent certain types of breast cancer. And it's also good for men, for example, in the prevention of prostate cancer. So there's actually it's a good thing to be eating soy products, specifically things like edamame and tofu, not the processed soy that comes into like a vegan hamburger. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about edamame, soy, for example. Now, granted, if you were to eat, you would have to eat, way too many grams of soy products in one day for there to even be a concern that it would lead to any health issues. But the type of way of eating that we're talking about right now, where we're whole food plant-based, we're focusing on a variety of foods and including soy products even once a day. For example, even for people who have had a history of breast cancer is a healthy thing and can in fact help do something like prevent breast cancer. Okay, other question. How can we get enough iron in our diet if we choose to eat whole food plant-based? I thought we needed animal for protein. Well, the wonderful thing is that most plant foods actually contain protein. Some of them more than others. So things that contain a lot of protein are beans, legumes, lentils. Some of the whole grains like quinoa, for example. Seeds contain protein. Even all the vegetables contain protein. If you look in your search engine for which plant foods contain protein, you might be surprised to understand that you can get protein from things like tofu and tempeh, soy, as well as all the beans and legumes. So there really aren't protein deficient people who are eating plants. So you don't need animal protein. And one of the things I usually hear mentioned when people ask this question is, I don't know if you know that gorillas are vegetarians. So some of the biggest apes on our planet, including things like elephants, eat plants. And they manage to grow rather big and strong only with plants because plants also contain protein. So the question is, can we eat soy more than once a day? We can incorporate it into 7 meals a day. Well, I would say that it's about a bit of moderation. So having soy, once a day sounds like a very reasonable thing. You could discuss with your health care professional just to make sure if they have any questions about reasons why you wouldn't want to eat that many. But I can say that probably not having, just like I said, you don't want to have avocado 8 times a day. You also don't want to have soy 8 times a day because there are other types of nutrients you also want to incorporate into your diet. But soy is one of the important ones you want to think about. There are just so many others that you also want to think about, including to make sure that you provide that variety that we talked about before. Okay, I'm looking to see if I missed any questions. I think those are the questions we have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. And I will stick around and look at the comments just to make sure I didn't miss any. Thank you all very much for your attention today. And just a reminder, we have another webinar in the coming weeks. Just watch the Wellbeing Aid Facebook page. And we look forward to seeing you again with us. Thank you again. And I will copy the feedback form in the chat box right now, just so that you have it. Let me make sure I put it there because we would love to receive your feedback. So here it is. Thank you again.